Early on in the series, we found out about transporting pests right around our environment. Well, they've got a problem here in Tasmania. I don't know much about it. It's called Didymo. But I'm here with Sarah Graham from Inland Fisheries in Tasmania. Welcome to River to Reef, Sarah. And what is Didymo? What's it all about?
Well, Didymo is a freshwater algae, and it's a diatom, a kind of algae, that's actually not found in Tasmania, so it's not a problem yet, and we don't want it to become a problem. So we're doing everything we can to keep it out of Tasmania and out of Australia. It's a pest algae for places in the southern hemisphere. It's common in the northern hemisphere. It commonly grows in high altitude, low nutrient streams, but it's started to invade other areas in the northern hemisphere as well, and it's a very big problem now in the South Island of New Zealand.
Yeah, well, that's a problem because that's very close, as we know, to us here. And I suppose the important thing is keeping it out of these pristine streams. What actually does it do?
Well, it starts off with just a cell, and this is the problem with Didymo, is it can be transferred just in moisture. So just one cell in a tiny drop of water in some equipment, fishing gear or boots, rods, reels, anything like that. And an angler could, by mistake, like they're not intending to, but they could introduce it to Australian waters and to Tasmanian waters, or, as in the case of New Zealand, from one waterway to another waterway. And what happens is the tiny microscopic cell forms colonies, and they attach to the rocks and the vegetation at the bottom of the stream, and when they bloom they completely smother the bottom of the stream. So it changes the whole ecosystem and the structure of that environment.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that has a drastic effect not only on the rivers itself, but the fish and everything that virtually survives around those waterways is going to be in strife.
That's right. It's no good for the ecosystem, for the community that lives on the bottom of the stream, because basically the sunlight and the food that would normally drop to the bottom of the river doesn't get through, so it changes all of the invertebrates that live underneath that, or they can't live underneath that. And then the fish that feed on those invertebrates, those small insects and larvae of insects that live on the bottom, the fish can't get their food, so the fish stocks will decrease. But not only that, it forms around the intake pipes for hydroelectric generation and for irrigation, and although it's not harmful directly to humans, it makes the environment in the water very difficult for recreation because it's so slippery and it looks disgusting. I mean, that's why it's called rock snot. Oh,
that's a very unfortunate name for it, there's no doubt about that. Well, we certainly don't want any of that coming into Australia if we can help it. What's the sort of things the preventative measures that are in place at the moment?
Well, the Australian government have recently introduced more stringent quarantine controls to prevent anglers bringing Didymo into Australia. Not just freshwater anglers, all freshwater users. So anything that might contain contaminated water, or water that contains Didymo, those pieces of equipment now have to be declared by the person bringing them into Australia. So that's the first barrier, if you like, to stopping and preventing Didymo starting in Australia. But it's part of a culture of anglers being more responsible for what they do in the environment. And basically, if we can get used to checking, cleaning and drying equipment between waterways, that would help for a lot of different species. And that means when a fisherman is leaving the water, they'd check the trailer and check the boat for clumps of algae and things which they wouldn't want to take away from that water and introduce to another water. So that stuff stays there. And then if they can do it, they should clean their boat and trailer when they first get the chance. And keeping things dry is always a really important thing too. Before you go fishing in another river or lake, or any environment, if the equipment's dry, there's less chance that you're going to introduce a pest to those waters.
Yeah, and I noticed that Tasmania is really making a big issue of this, which it is, probably more so than the other states. Why in particular is Tasmania the one that's bringing it to the fore?
Yeah, that's right. We're probably more concerned because we, hate to say this, but we value our fishery very highly, our freshwater trout fishery in Tasmania. It's also the fact that we're a cooler temperate environment, so we've got low nutrient, high altitude lakes and rivers, which is the optimal sort of habitat for Didymo. And also because we've got a large number of interstate and international anglers that fish here, they're more likely to, inadvertently bring Didymo in on their equipment.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? The last thing we want to do, as we said right at the start, is to turn these pristine waters into a real quagmire and destroy our environment. So there you have it, guys. If you are fishing interstate or overseas, just be very, very careful. Make sure you clean everything before you come over, because we want to keep Didymo out.
Absolutely.
No worries. For more information on Didymo, just log on to River to Reef's website and follow the links.